Today, our message is Shemini, and it was written by Mauricio Quintero, but I'll be reading it in English. So when I say I, it means Mauricio. But it's a wonderful message, and I'm looking forward to sharing it with all of you. Now, this parasha covers a variety of topics. Our sages have highlighted the following. After 7 days, which is the number of creation, the eighth day appears, representing the circle, the spiritual, the day on which the service of the Mishkan would be inaugurated, teaching us that to reach the Olam Haba, the world to come, we must grow through service to God. We come full circle as we notice that the service was inaugurated on the first day of the month of Nisan, when God began his creation in Bereshit. Then, on a most glorious day of rejoicing, when God's presence would be manifested, a tragic and unexpected incident took place after the office of the Kohanim was established. Aaron's sons, Nadav and Abihu, were consumed by an Ish Zara, a divine fire or a strange fire. Notice that this fire was spiritual, because we later read that Moses asked that their bodies and clothes be removed from that place. So from this, we can deduce they were not burned to death. Aaron was so astonished, and he remained silent at what happened. These were his sons. Then Moshe had a disagreement with him regarding the instructions for the offerings, because he was mourning the loss of his sons. Next comes the instructions on purity and impurity, beginning with what we eat, our food. And then next parasha will continue with the ritual purity derived from the mikvah. But I want to focus today on the Haftarah in 2 Samuel 6, but not on that particular moment, rather on what had happened 20 years earlier. Remember what it says in Vayikra 11:45, "You shall be holy, for I am holy." The question then is, how do we achieve holiness? Taking the previous idea in mind, keeping that in mind, 2 verses might be able to answer this question. The first is in Vayikra 10:11, and this is not what it says literally, but a little bit of an interpretation. Only when you are sober will it be relevant for you to distinguish between actions that sanctify your offerings and the ones which make them profane. The second is in Ezekiel 44:23, and they will declare to my people what is holy and what is profane, and they will inform them of what is pure and what is impure. Now, to summarize the history described in 1 Samuel 4-8, Eli, which means my God, was serving then as the Kohen Hagadol, the high priest. And he had 2 sons, Pinchas, his name comes from Penachash, or what means serpent's mouth, and Hophni, meaning boxer or wrestler. These were descendants of Aaron, who served as Kohanim, priests. Eli's nature was to always be pleasant. He got along with everyone he met, and he behaved, as we say in my country, la fiesta en paz, the one who likes to keep the peace. So much so that he never reprimanded his sons, even though they behaved very poorly during the divine service, as we read in 1 Samuel 2:12-26. Suddenly, God issues his judgment against Eli's house through a man of God, declaring in 1 Samuel 2:27-36, "You have honored your sons more than me." That's verse 29. "The time is coming when I will break your power and the power of your father's house, and there will not be an old man in your house. And this will be a sign for you. The fate of your two sons, Hophni and Pinchas, both will die on the very same day. And I will raise up for myself a faithful priest who will act according to my desires and my purposes. I will build him a lasting house, and he will walk before me anointed forever. And all the survivors of your house will come and bow before him for a reward and a morsel of bread. And they will say, please assign me a priestly task that I may eat a morsel of bread. This sentence was handed down when Samuel was still a child, so there was no way he could have known about this incident. This young Samuel was not the son of a descendant of Aaron, so he shouldn't have been a Kohen, yet he heard the voice of the Eternal. Samuel again receives confirmation of the judgment upon the house of Eli, as we read in 1 Samuel 3, verses 13 to 18. It says, on that day I will perform against Eli all that I have spoken concerning his house from beginning to end. And I declare to him that I will condemn his house to eternal punishment for the iniquity which he knew, for how his sons committed sacrilege at will, and how he did not rebuke them. Surely I swear by the house of Eli that the iniquity of the house of Eli will never be atoned for with sacrifice or offering. But unlike Eli, Samuel declared everything, even though he was afraid to speak due to his age and his financial dependence on Eli. It seems that the story of Aaron is repeated when he says in verse 18, he is the Lord, he will do what seems good to him. That is, he was passive when faced with problems. We saw how passive and evasive Aaron was in the incident of the golden calf, the same as he was here regarding his two sons. And this is how 1 Samuel 4 begins. And the word of Samuel went out to all Israel. Since Samuel was not a priest, it was not up to him to consult or pass judgment through the Urim and Tumim, as we read in Exodus 28:30. This should have been up to the high priest. However, we read that Israel, with the mindset of, I can, I'm strong, I am mighty, no one can bend me, decided to go fight the Philistines when God had not commanded this war, and they had not consulted him about whether or not they should engage in this battle. 1 Samuel 4:2 says that Israel was defeated by the Philistines and that 4,000 people died in that battle. Then verse 3 continues, when the troops returned to the camp, the elders of Israel asked, why has the Lord defeated us today before the Philistines? Let us bring up the ark of the covenant of the Lord from Shiloh. In this way, he will be present among us, and he will deliver us from the hands of our enemies. Here we see that their trust was not in the God of Israel, but in the ark, the artifact, which had become a talisman or an idol, thus losing its true purpose. Again, we don't read that they went to consult God, but rather it was out of their stubbornness that they decided to go to war, thinking that they could bend God's will to theirs, and that because they were carrying the ark, luck would be on their side. How many people act like this today? Symbols like the mezuzah, the Magen David, the Torah scroll, etc., have become lucky charms. Furthermore, they tended to handle the ark of God without respect or decorum. This was a symbol that should have been treated with respect, not like a Jedi's sword. Everyone's blindness was such that when Israel saw the Ark of the Covenant returning, what they saw was a super weapon, because everyone shouted so loudly that the Philistines questioned what was happening in 1 Samuel 4. And their idolatry was such that the Philistines related that object, that is the ark, to being a god. But the truth was that the God of Israel did not come to the camp. What was the result of this battle? Well, there were 30,000 dead. And the ark was captured, literally stolen, kidnapped, and taken before Dagon. And finally, Eli's sons were both murdered. Then the same day, a Benjamite brought the news to Eli, of whom it says, his eyes were fixed in a blind gaze. This is very profound because it does not say that he was blind. It says that he had a dull vision. And then the story comments that he died, interestingly, by his neck when he fell. This represents his stubbornness, his obstinacy. Thus, the words announced by an unnamed man of God and by Samuel were fulfilled. What happened to the ark? Well, the Philistines placed it in the most profane place in existence, in the temple of Dagon, represented by a man on the top and a fish on the bottom. This was the god of fertility, of vengeance. And it was considered father of the gods, creator of heaven and earth, and a judge. This god was worshipped by presenting offerings of animals and grains. Interesting. The image was clear for the Philistines. The ark was God, Adonai, and they placed it at the feet of their god, Dagon, for obvious reasons. They wanted to give the image that Dagon was more of a god than the God of heaven, and that it was sitting at his feet as a symbol of surrender. However, here, I realize that God doesn't need anyone to defend him or to demonstrate that he was God. Then the god strangely fell over during the night and it had to be put back in its place as if he were holding God under his feet. The next day, Dagon appeared on the ground again, but this time with his hands and head cut off. But his mouth remained intact. Immediately, a plague of hemorrhoids spread. So they moved the ark where? To Gaza, known then as Gat, where its inhabitants were struck with plagues. Then they moved it to Ekron, invading its inhabitants with a deadly panic. It remained in Philistia for 7 months until they decided to return it to Israel, paying a ransom as compensation for the theft. They then sent the ark with 5 golden mice and 5 golden hemorrhoids. Of course, in their ignorance, they presented something that, although it was in good faith, it was totally impure. Then they humbled themselves before God because they recognized that God had previously dealt severely with Egypt due to its harshness. So they returned it to Israel, transported by 2 milk cows. They said if the cows went up right away to Israel, God had sent these plagues, and if not, it was a coincidence. The Torah says that the cows did arrive at the right place, Beth Shemesh, proving that it was the Eternal who had brought all the evils upon the Philistines. This is how our Haftarah begins. After 20 years of the ark being in Kiryat Ye'arim, David decided he desired to return the ark to Jerusalem. His heart was to make a permanent home for God there, but the temple would be built later by his son Solomon. Once again, emotions, not sobriety, controlled David. And although Uzzah was driven by good intentions, he touched the ark and he died. Then an act that should have been a joyful one was again turned to tragedy. But this forced David to educate himself on how the ark should be properly transported. Because at the end of the day, what is holy, profane, pure or impure has nothing to do with intention, nor desire, nor emotion. Rather, it had to do with respect for the character of God and whether or not we are presentable, suitable, or worthy to stand before Him, and whether we are obedient to His words or not. Our prophet Hosea 4, verse 6 says, "My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge or understanding." And it is here that what is written in our portion is perfectly displayed. Our lack of knowledge and understanding can lead us to commit sacrilege before the Eternal and turn joyful days into tragic, sad ones. Abihu and Nadav, Hophni and Pinchas seemed like a mirror in time. Likewise, the stories of Eli and Aaron coincide by not doing what God asks us to do. Some offered fire, not required by the Eternal. Others ate what they shouldn't have eaten, in addition to practicing bribery. Eli and Aaron were two great leaders, but because they danced around to please everyone and be in everyone's good graces, they lost their loved ones. So let us ask ourselves, am I doing what God has asked me to do? Am I presentable before Him? Do I fear His presence? Have I turned symbols into amulets, replacing the true God? My desire is that I can learn to differentiate between the holy and the profane, and the pure from the impure, in order to live a life without unhappy surprises. Shabbat Shalom.